Hello everybody, it's Colin Murphy here from Torcana. Thanks very much for tuning in to our audio presentation, and for the next 15 to 20 minutes I'm going to do my best to tell you all about our latest offering of Landplots in Cape Coral, Florida. We've been working on this for quite a few months and we're quite excited by it, so hope you enjoy the presentation. What I'm going to discuss firstly, before we get into all the nitty-gritty about land plots in Cape Coral, is just some general thoughts I have on the importance of protecting and growing your wealth. After that, we'll run very briefly through the huge changes we've seen in the Florida market over the last 6 or 7 years. Next on to why we feel land is one of the most appealing options available to buyers today. Not necessarily 2 years ago and not necessarily in 2 years' time, but we think it is today. I'm going to talk about why we've chosen Cape Coral, Florida. I think it has a wide number of characteristics that make it perfect for this type of investment. We're going to discuss how to identify and purchase and crucially resell the best land plots at a profit. I'm going to go through some of the most frequently asked questions we've come across. And that's it. So let's start. Protecting and growing your wealth. Well, I think everybody would agree that most people are much more protective of their hard-earned salaries now than they were 5 or 6 years ago when credit was a lot easier. We've probably all had a tendency maybe to spend a bit less, save a bit more, and maybe avoid some of the big investments. We've had a much more safer and conservative attitude, and I've certainly noticed that with a huge number of the clients that we've spoken to. However, the truth is, over the long term, we really need to invest in growth assets to have money set aside for large things like children's educations, second homes, big medical expenses, retirement. These things need to have a lot of money set aside to take care of them. And the truth really is that cash in a bank, any type of savings is a terrible source of wealth. It loses value continuously through inflation, and you might not notice it, but over 5 to 10 years, leaving cash in the bank is the financial equivalent of the frog in a slow boiling pot of water. You might not notice it at first, but it can cause huge damage to you. And the key really is to have a diverse range of investments, and that would typically include equities, bonds, and commodities, cash savings, and absolutely I think real estate has a part to play in that mix as well, which is I guess where we come in. So moving on to Florida, massive changes in Florida. Starting in 2006, which was the top of a really 15-year boom where prices doubled every 5 years. The market came to a shuddering halt, late 2006, early 2007. However, the truth is that the market really bottomed out in Florida, and in fact in most of the USA, about 3 years ago. In the middle of 2010, the market bottomed out, and prices have been steady and increasing since then. And both not just prices but also sales volumes, as in the numbers of properties changing hands every month, is now at a level where it was back in 2004 and 2005. And that's hard to notice if you're not looking at the statistics on a regular basis or reading certain types of articles. And builders are back building again. They're breaking ground on new sites. I visited a lot of new build property over the last couple of years all over Florida. Owner occupiers are getting finance. Rental demand is very high. There's a lot of big funds that have been coming into Florida. A lot of money chasing properties really has driven the volumes up very high. And this graph here I think illustrates it quite well. This is for the Cape Coral area, but the Florida area itself isn't all that different. You can see the huge, let me just illustrate a little better. You can see the huge peaks here during that crazy time from 2003 to 2006, and the massive drop from 2007 to 2010 where prices effectively went back to where they were back in the late 1990s. But really ever since beginning of 2011, middle of 2011, which is 2 years ago, prices have been increasing very, very steadily. And that trend I think is set to continue. We're not going to see anything crazy, any crazy spikes, but I think everybody pretty much agrees, certainly all the main commentators and The Economist and the Financial Times and the Case-Shiller indices certainly point to a continuous but modest recovery, and that's a very good time I think for people that have been a bit scared to jump on board now that you've had 2 and sometimes 3 years of price increases but modest increases. This is still a very nice time to get back on board. So why invest in land rather than property? I mean, of course, there are a lot of people that would like to have real estate as part of a diverse portfolio, but don't necessarily want the perceived hassle of dealing with tenants, dealing with maintenance issues that crop up with properties, and that's understandable. Land on the other hand, you don't have that. I mean, it's an asset that just sits there and takes care of itself. The entry levels are very, very low. Really, $15,000 and upwards, about 15% of its former sales prices, and that's another thing. Whereas property prices have been increasing by 20 or 30% over the last 2 or 3 years, as I've just seen, the trajectory of the land graph is only now catching up to that. So it's starting to surge. There is very, very high profit potential. I mean, land traditionally is about 20% of the cost of a whole house. It is by far the biggest expense in building a house, is the cost of the plot it's situated on, and usually at about 20%, whereas now it's still close to 10, 15% of the cost of building a house, and that's going to revert back to its historical averages. And certainly if these double-digit increases continue the way they are, the running costs, which is one of the main benefits, any property landlord will know how much a vacancy can burn your hole in your pocket if it's empty for 3 or 4 months. That's obviously not the case with a vacant piece of land. Your annual running costs are usually about $250, so really very, very modest costs. And as I was saying, land prices are going to revert back to their historical prices. We're already seeing it. The graphs are all moving in the right direction. And land, like pretty much every asset class you can think of, goes through cycles of deflation and inflation, price falls and price rises, and the trick is to identify when land prices are falling, when you think they've bottomed out, to get involved then and to use it as a storage of your value and to sell it at a profit when the market's going back up. That is what land investors do. It's a simple thing to explain. It's not that easy to do in practice. You have to identify the right types of land plots at the right prices and know how and when to sell them. But the process is very, very simple. And so why did we choose Cape Coral? Well, Cape Coral is located in the southwest corner of Florida. It's about 2 hours south of Tampa and 2 hours west of Miami. Like a lot of cities in Florida, surprising amount of cities, it was founded by visionary property developers about 55 years ago, the Rosen brothers, where they literally bought 100 to 120 mile square acres of swampland, really, and converted it into a tropical paradise, where they would have drained hundreds of miles of canals, built roads, put in infrastructure, built bridges, spent massive amounts of money, had huge marketing campaigns throughout the 60s and 70s, and they literally created a thriving city from nothing. I mean, it was incorporated as a city in 1970, and as of now, it's a very wealthy city with a young population. Average age is 39, although it is very popular with retirees and second homeowners as well. Very low crime, very high quality of life. Median household income is $55,000, which is about 10% higher than the Florida average. Most importantly, though, from a land buyer's point of view, it's one of the fastest growing cities in the USA with a population of over 100,000 people. I mean, back 20 years ago, which is about a generation ago, the population was half what it was now. It was about 75,000 people back in 1990, went up to about 105,000 in the year 2000, and now it's 157, 158,000 in 2013. And it's increasing by about 7 or 8% every year, which is a very, very fast increase for any city of this size, where the populations are effectively doubling every generation, and it is a limited amount of land to build on. It's a peninsula. There's more than 400 miles of canals, which is more than Venice, Italy. Not a lot of people know that it is a city of beautiful canals, and the sun shines all year round, 355 days a year. Average temperatures are very, very pleasant, between 18 and 29 degrees Celsius. So how do we identify the best land plots? Because of course, if you're not familiar with Cape Coral and you're just using your Google map to zoom in on one piece of land rather than the other, they can all look the same. But you have to dig a lot deeper than that, and that's why we've taken quite a few months to prepare this, you need to try and understand where the population is growing, because it does grow in certain directions. Part of it is just natural growth and part of it is controlled by the city authorities, who outline where the new infrastructure is going to go, which areas are going to get zoned for commercial activities, which areas are going to get zoned for residential. There's a lot of factors at play here. And let me just get this text up. Originally back in the 60s, the first development was just here in the south and southwest corners. This is where the oldest houses in Cape Coral are located. And over the next 20 years, it obviously moved north towards Pine Island Road, which is a major road pretty much dissecting Cape Coral. And what's important to realize now is that the Gulf Coast is here. This is a boater's paradise. Proximity to the Gulf Coast is of massive importance to anybody, and I'll explain that in more detail for a minute. But what everything is pointing to is growth in this direction. Okay, they started down here by the Gulf Coast, moved northwards, and now it's moving northwards but westwards. And the plots that we're selling are in this key part of Cape Coral, the southwest. Some of our competitors are selling them up in this direction, which is a completely different part of Cape Coral. These are all freshwater canals. These are saltwater canals with direct access to the Gulf. There's a very big difference. Okay, so Old Burnstore Road, this is where the money is going to be made over the next 5 years. This is where Torcana have been sourcing land plots. And the lot system, there's different types of land plots. Some of them cost you $15,000, some of them cost you $300,000. So there's, let me explain a little bit how that works. The first type is your vacant dry lot, and a dry lot is simply a land plot that is not facing water in any direction. It's facing other plots or other roads, and you can see on your top left of your screen is a typical lot surrounded by very nice homes, with the ones on the right facing a canal. So these are the most affordable types. They can be, sourced from $15,000, $20,000. They would have been $80,000 or $90,000 during the boom. And as I was saying a moment ago, the prime locations are up in the northwest of Cape Coral, and these dry lots can typically be secured for under $20,000. Your next category is your canal lots. Now, as I was saying, there's 400 miles of canal in Cape Coral. Roughly half of those are seawater canals, which obviously go into the sea, and half of them are freshwater canals, which are linked to a network of freshwater lakes. Now, there's a difference between the two. The saltwater ones, as you might expect, are generally more expensive than the freshwater ones. And much more importantly, that the saltwater canals with unobstructed access to the Gulf are by far the most expensive. And by unobstructed access, I simply mean you have direct access to the Gulf. You don't need to, there's no bridges in the way. Anybody that is serious about boating, anybody that's got any kind of boat that's more than 5 foot high, will need unobstructed access to the Gulf if they need to sail around the Florida bays. So that's very important. There's a big difference between the price of a house on one side of a bridge and another side of a bridge. Could be $100,000 or $200,000 just because of that bridge preventing access for boaters. But generally, obviously, the water-facing ones are more, those views command a premium. Prices can start at $25,000. The most expensive at all are the lots not facing a canal but facing open water. Literally, you're on the bay, you're on the Gulf, and those are actually, there's not that many of them available. Most of the land plots in Cape Coral are dry or facing a canal, so these are quite prestigious. You have a lot of massive multi-million-dollar homes in these areas. The lots themselves, just the land plots, and these are 10,000 square foot, quarter-acre land plots would have sold for up to $1 million during the boom, but that's fallen dramatically now, and you can secure them for a fraction of that, but you'll still pay a decent six-figure sum for any open water lot in Cape Coral. And so what's the opportunity here? Well, let me just summarize what we are offering, what Torcana are offering. A range of they're exclusive to us. Nobody else is selling these specific plots. They're not listed on any websites. They're not sold by anybody else. They're starting from $15,900. Full planning permissions are in place. These are all in areas zoned for residential single-family homes. There's no speculation about buying raw land here. These are in areas surrounded by other houses, and you can build houses on them. These are normal, functional neighborhoods. a mixture of dry canal waterfront lots, which I just described to you a moment ago. They're all typical lots range in size for 10 to 15,000 square feet. There's not a huge amount of variation there. All these plots are fully vetted. We've literally been to them all, and they've been sourced directly from lenders and bulk sellers. The closing costs are negligible, the running costs, as are the running costs, and we have a clearly defined exit strategy, which I'll explain to you in a couple of moments. I think land prices are experiencing double-digit growth across Florida. There's certain parts where you're looking at 30 to 40% gains a year. It's not unheard of. I mean, bear in mind that these are 15 to 20% of their peak prices. It'd take many, many years of 30% growth to get back to where they were, but you are experiencing it now, and there is very, very significant capital appreciation potential here, which is one of the things I like best about it. The purchase process, as you would probably expect, is very straightforward. The first thing you need to do is have a chat with us and discuss your budget and pick a land plot. You then pay a 15% deposit to a local title company in nearby Fort Myers. You sign and return a short purchase agreement. The balance of your purchase price is paid within 30 days. These are all 30-day closings. Your closing costs, you're looking at about $600 for your standard title insurance and other minor fees. And after that, the local authorities transfer ownership of your name, and you'll get the warranty deeds in the post. It's very simple. 4 or 5 weeks and you're done. 15% deposit, then the rest on closing. So what's your exit strategy? That's, I would hope, a key concern of anybody looking to get involved in this. I mean, one thing that I would like to emphasize is that we don't offer what I call gimmicks and other people call incentives, is like buyback options or bundle closing costs. I really get a bit annoyed when I see these where people are told that we'll buy it back off you at a 50% profit in 3 years, when the reality is it's a voluntary buyback. The seller can choose to do it or not, and they won't actually choose to do it unless that represents a discount on the market rate, so it's effectively meaningless. Or where you're bundling these $600 closing costs and running costs for a couple of years, which are only $250 a year running costs in the first place. They're just built into the purchase price. But worse than that, if the seller forgets to pay them, you're going to have to go chasing them for this money, and you can get into trouble with the tax authorities over these silly amounts of money. So I don't really see the benefit of those gimmicks at all. But basically, you're buying plots in residential areas. These are not full of investors. These are areas where you have owner-occupiers and families building houses and living there, and that is by far the nicest and best exit strategy. So when you want to sell, you will list your property for sale on the local multiple listing system, the MLS, which is the database of all properties for sale. We'll help you do it with one of our local realtors, or you can choose your own local realtor. You'll either be selling to an agent who represents a buyer who wants to just build a home. You have a buyer that's just given a local realtor instructions, go and find me a plot of land in Old Burnstore Road, or you'll be billing to a local builder, which are buying land plots in huge amounts all over Florida now. So these are by far the largest target markets. You're not selling to another investor. That's not the most profitable way to get out of this. If you want to make the most money, you sell to somebody who's building a house or somebody who wants to live in a house. And they're the most profitable exit routes, and they're the biggest potential exit routes as well. So, what I can say is that we do maintain very close relationships with local agents and builders in these areas, and we're very happy to keep you informed on market activity and potential sale dates and prices. So, for example, if you buy a plot from us now and you tell us, well, I'm looking at a 2 or 3 year time frame, then we'll be very happy to get in touch with you in 2 or 3 years saying, listen, prices have gone up by 20 or 30% a year. You bought it for 20,000. We think you can list it for 35,000 now if you want to sell it. Here's how you do it, and you'll go ahead and do it like that, or you'll hold it for the longer term and profit at a later date. You have a lot of options here, and it doesn't really cost you much money in the meantime. So some frequently asked questions that we've heard, and we have more. I'm only going to go through 4 of them now. We have a lot more in our brochure. And here's another, probably a better map of Cape Coral here, which you can see a bit more clearly. So title insurance and closing costs. So $600 is your standard closing cost. So if you buy a plot of land for $20,000, the total amount you're going to spend would be about $20,600. Pretty straightforward, and that's pretty consistent across the board. Your running costs are $250 to $300 a year. That's a very simple process where you log on to the local city website and you just pay your fees once a year. Generally around November time you get some incentives to pay early, but it's a very simple process. You don't have to file tax returns or anything like that because these plots are not earning income, so it's a pretty straightforward process. Are all land plots zoned for residential construction? Absolutely they are. Residential single family homes. Part of our due diligence pack includes detailed city zoning maps where you can clearly see that the areas where our land plots are located are zoned for residential construction, so there shouldn't be any confusion there. Average building costs, some of you might wish to build a home on your lot to live in or sell in as a home plus lot. That's absolutely fine, a very viable strategy. Very happy to help you with that. Ballpark figures, 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot home would cost about $175,000, about $115 per square foot. If you want a bit bigger, up to 2,500 square feet, you're looking at about $120 per square foot for that. Homes and water lots are more expensive for obvious reasons. You have, sea walls and a little bit more complication building beside the water, and you're probably going to pay about an extra $50 per square foot for that. So that 3-bed, 2-bath would probably cost you about $260,000 if it was facing the water, but certainly you'll get that back when the time comes to sell. Are utilities and phone or internet access available? The answer, you'll be glad to hear, is yes. The local utility companies are mandated by law, by the city and county to provide these services. And what generally happens is if you contract a builder to build you a home, they will simply call up the local utility company when they're ready to get connected, and somebody will come out within a couple of weeks and get you hooked up. And that's how it works. It's a very simple process. So what's next? If you want to learn more about this, as you might already realize, we have a full 15-page brochure with lots of diagrams and explanations about how this works. We have, aside from this video, we have 3 other videos, one of our site vids and 2 of Cape Coral itself, just promotional videos telling you about Cape Coral, lots of very nice aerial overviews of the city, so worth sitting down through 10 minutes of that. We have a price and availability list which has map coordinates for every single plot and comparisons as well, live listings for similar plots so that you know that these are competitively priced. We have a very comprehensive due diligence pack which has things like zoning maps, canal maps, local real estate market overviews, the Cape Coral business environment, things like that, which are well worth reading through in your spare time. And really the next step is just to talk to us. If you're interested in getting involved in Cape Coral property, if you like the look of our land plots and our due diligence packs, just send us an email and let's arrange a conversation. We're on Skype all the time. If anybody uses Skype, you'll get me on Torcana-Colin and my partner David Shaw on Torcana-David. Here are our main phone numbers for the US, UK and Ireland. And that's really it. Thank you very much for sitting through the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I obviously hope to be hearing from you very soon.